And in the beginning of it all, a boy named Watari is approached by the classmates who try to influence him to join one of the school clubs. However, Watari reminds the boys that he needs to take care of his younger sister at home. Having said that, he leaves the boys behind. At this point, the two classmates notice something strange about Watari. After all, he always uses the same excuse for everything. And what's more, one of the boys says that Watari has been hanging around his sister all the time since he transferred to that school, which makes him believe that he has a complex about his sister. While walking through the school hallways, Watari is approached by Tokui, who asks to talk to him for a moment. At that, the boy invites him to be part of a group that has not yet been decided. Upon hearing this, Watari uses the same excuse as always, saying that he needs to take care of his sister. And then Ishihara, a girl he likes, invites him to participate in the meeting among the students, but Watari continues to refuse the invitations that his classmates make him. At that, Ishihara reminds him that their house is close by, so she arranges to go to his house to leave the meeting notes. Well, when he gets home, Watari says that his life revolves around his younger sister, Suzu, so he prepares something for the girl to eat, when suddenly, he is approached by Tamayo, his aunt, who arrives in the kitchen without saying hello to anyone. And besides that, Tamayo starts to tease Watari, saying that he takes after his father a lot, unlike Suzu, who was lucky enough to take after her mother more. Having said that, he gives Watari his allowance and suggests that he use the money to give Suzu a present, since today is her birthday. After giving him his allowance, Tamayo turns her back and, with a treacherous look, says she feels like she is giving an allowance to an older brother. Upon hearing this, Watari starts to feel strange about her, but thanks her for the money he received. And when it's time to sleep, Watari remembers that his aunt is indeed very mysterious, because even though she is the housewife, she spends most of her day holed up in her room, and also never goes out to work. Well, the next day, Suzu goes after him and asks Watari to help her fix her hair. He then offers to help her that day, but asks her not to depend on him for everything. Upon hearing this, Suzu counters by saying that he will take care of her until she is very old. After all, they are the only living members of the family. Upon hearing this, Watari remembers that his parents died 2 years ago, so he and his sister Suzu had to leave the residence where they lived in Shinshu, and since then, they have lived in the houses of various relatives, until arriving at the house of their aunt Tamayo, who lives in the suburbs of Tokyo. And while he stands there thinking about life, Suzu notices him delaying her, and asks him to go and comb her hair right away. On the way to school, Watari promises to buy Suzu a present as soon as she gets out of school, so he asks her to go straight home after class. Upon arriving at school, Watari talks to Ishihara again, and blushes, just admiring the girl's beauty. However, Tokui advises him to forget about the girl, if he likes her. Upon hearing this, Watari agrees with them, and says that Ishihara really is too much of a pushover for him. As for Tokui, he remembers a pretty girl who transferred to the class next to theirs, and according to what he heard, the girl's name is Tachibana Satsuki. And well, at another moment, Watari meets the girl and starts to get irritated, remembering the bad things she has done, like when she destroyed the school garden. And seeing that he remembers her, Satsuki becomes shappy and says that she has been following him ever since she transferred to that school. As for him, Watari makes it clear that he has not forgiven her since she destroyed the school garden years ago. And upon hearing this, Satsuki ignores his frustration regarding this incident and says that she wants to talk to him about something very important. But just like before, Watari makes the excuse that he is busy. At this, Satsuki calls him an asshole and says that he used to be nicer to her back then. He then retorts, saying that she was the one who disappeared out of nowhere. Upon hearing this, Satsuki throws herself on his back and hugs him, saying that she will only let him go after he has heard everything she has to say. Meanwhile, Suzu returns home after school, and on the way, she thinks about what she will ask for as a gift, until she passes by a family watering their garden, and after seeing this, she finally decides what gift she will ask for, until suddenly, Watari runs past her and grabs her by the shirt in a hurry to get away from there. At that moment, Satsuki appears right after, running after Watari. But in the end, Watari manages to escape from the girl in time. As for Suzu, she lets the incident go, and says that she was thinking about what gift to ask for, and decided that she wants to have a garden. Upon hearing this, Watari deduces that he misheard her request. However, Suzu realizes that she wants to have a garden. In this, he explains to the girl that this gift cannot be granted. After all, they would need to have land to start cultivating a garden. When he says he can't buy what she asked for, Suzu gets angry and remembers that he said he would buy her anything she wanted, even if it was expensive. Suddenly, Tamaya comes up to them, emanating a scary aura, and says they can use her backyard to make a garden. When he gets there, Watari notices that the backyard is worse than he imagined, but decides to try to plant something there anyway. But before they can start the job, they are approached by Satsuki. Meanwhile, Ishihara searches for Watari's house to deliver the reports from the meeting he had with the other students. Returning to Watari, he is startled to see Satsuki there and asks what she wants. She then reminds him that she needs to talk to him, but Watari gets angry with her and says that his only goal at the moment is to live a normal life with his sister. Seeing him in that state, Satsuki kisses him in an attempt to convince him to talk to her. Suddenly, Ishihara arrives at the place and the first thing he sees is Watari and Satsuki kissing. Even though he is faced with this embarrassing situation, Watari begins to enjoy the moment until suddenly he blacks out and wakes up in his room. Then Tamaya goes to him, irritated, and says that if she sees him flirting in her garden again, she will kick him out. And when it comes to Suzu, she also shows that she is irritated with Watari and says that she can clean the garden alone while he keeps making out with Satsuki. And meanwhile, at school, Ishihara continues to think about what she saw the day before and deduces that Watari and Satsuki are dating. And suddenly, Watari goes to her and apologizes for not having gone to the meeting the day before. However, Ishihara apologizes back, saying that it was she who was responsible for not bringing the notes, as she had said she would. But as for Watari, he makes it clear that he won't be able to attend the next meeting either. After all, he needs to take care of his sister. And when he sees that he is a brother present in Suzu's life, Ishihara becomes envious of the girl, because according to her, her older brother hasn't spoken to her for a long time. And upon hearing this, Watari says that her brother has to be lucky to have her as a sister. And suddenly, Satsuki appears behind him calling him, and then starts touching Ishihara's breast and says that Watari apparently likes women with big breasts like Ishihara's. Upon seeing Satsuki doing these things, Watari runs away from the place, taking her with him. Satsuki takes advantage of the fact that she is alone with him and returns a swollen ball that she had taken from him 6 years earlier. Upon hearing this, Watari remembers that day when he first met Satsuki. At that time, they started talking until suddenly they started seeing each other more often. But suddenly, Satsuki destroyed the entire Watari family garden and fled the place without coming back to talk to him again. And although many years have passed, Satsuki says she doesn't intend to talk about why she did it, and at the same time, she understands that she can't expect his forgiveness anytime soon. However, Satsuki says she truly regrets what she did. However, Watari reminds her that in addition to what happened with the garden, she also kissed him in front of his younger sister, something that made the situation even worse. Having said that, he asks what exactly she wants from him, and seeing that he still hasn't realized, Satsuki decides to let this conversation go. And when leaving school, Watari notices that Ishihara spent the entire class avoiding making eye contact with him, something that ruined his day, because Ishihara had always been his greatest comfort during high school, but everything was ruined by Satsuki's actions. Suddenly, Watari comes face to face with Satsuki, who is carrying Suzu with her. He notices a bruise on Satsuki's leg and starts to threaten her with the bruise, as he believes she has done something wrong to his sister. However, she lets go of Suzu without causing any commotion. Watari's sister runs to him to hug him, and is happy to see that he really loves her so much. However, she reassures him, saying that Satsuki was just carrying her after she fell to the ground awkwardly. Furthermore, Suzu says that she managed to convince Satsuki to help them in the garden. Upon hearing this, Watari is left confused, as he thought Suzu didn't like seeing him with other girls. Suzu says that she still thinks that way, but she doesn't see any problem with Watari staying by Satsuki's side, since Suzu remembered that she was the girl who lived in their old house. The next day, Ishihara calls Watari to help her with the shopping needed for the school's construction site, since the members of her group won't be able to participate in the tasks that day. Watari decides to make an exception for her, and while they're shopping, Ishihara gathers the courage and asks him if he's dating Satsuki. Upon hearing this, Watari is startled by this sudden question and says that they spend a lot of time together just because they've known each other since childhood. As they leave the store, Watari and Ishihara are approached by Suzu, who starts to get irritated with him again, as she misunderstands everything and deduces that he is on a date with Ishihara, so he calms her down by giving her a blue puffy as a gift. As soon as they get home, Suzu runs to Tamaya to show her the gift she just received. As for Watari, he goes to the garden to see if he can find Satsuki, and when he gets there, he notices the garden is cleaner than before. At this, Satsuki says that she only fulfilled her promise to help him with the garden. Having said that, she starts to take off her clothes to change, and asks him to look away while she does so. However, Watari tries to stop her from taking off her clothes right there, but in the middle of the pushing and shoving, the two fall to the ground together, and at that exact moment, Tamaya goes to the place, and gets angry when she sees that Watari has disobeyed the order she had given him, not to make out with Satsuki in her garden, after once again destroying the reputation of Naoto and his aunt. Satsuki apologizes and says she explained the situation to Tamaya, but upon hearing this, Naoto tells her she'd better keep quiet, as going to his aunt in the state will only make things worse. Suddenly, Suzu approaches them and asks if something's wrong. Naoto decides to take her for a walk, and as for Satsuki, he tells her to go home before dark, but instead of complying, she decides to follow him on his walk with Suzu. Satsuki then says her house is on the way there, so she's taking the opportunity to accompany them. However, upon hearing this lame excuse, Naoto reminds her that her house is actually in another direction. As for him, Naoto says he'll have to move again, given the anger his aunt expressed when she saw him breaking her trust twice. And although he's being kicked out of her house, Naoto says he expected it to happen at some point. Upon hearing this, Satsuki asks why he initially moved in with his aunt. However, seeing her wanting to know something so personal, Naoto cuts her off, saying it's none of her business. Satsuki then tugs at his tie and reminds him that they've been friends for a long time, so he shouldn't treat her like a stranger. Furthermore, she says she already knows what happened to his parents. Hearing this, Naoto realizes she's right, and so he finally decides to tell her what really happened. In fact, Aunt Tamayo was simply the next relative in line to put up with him and Suzu, which is why they ended up at her house. Furthermore, Naoto says that his parents' marriage was never well received by the rest of the family, which in turn makes him and his sister frown upon them. As she listens to him, Satsuki notices Naoto belittling himself and seeing himself as a burden to be endured. However, she reminds him that his aunt allowed Naoto to use her garden, so Satsuki believes Tamayo isn't against living with them. That said, she makes it clear that Suzu and Naoto can move in with her if they are kicked out. After all, she lives alone and doesn't need anyone's permission to take them in. Upon returning home, Naoto enters the bathroom and suddenly bumps into Tamayo, who is still in the shower. As soon as she notices him, she orders him to leave. Naoto obeys and then begins talking to her from outside, saying that the fact that she allows him to use her garden is a sign that Tamayo agrees to them living with her for at least a few years, considering that it would take a while for the seeds to grow into trees. Upon hearing this, Tamayo tells him he's overinterpreting things to the point of creating things in his head that don't actually exist. At this, Naoto kneels before her and asks to stay a little longer, as Tamayo was the only person who, besides sheltering them, spoke to them normally, as if they were truly family. After listening to everything he has to say, Tamayo leaves the bathroom and asks if the girl from before was his girlfriend. Naoto explains that Satsuki is actually just a childhood friend who came to the garden to help him with the planning. Furthermore, he makes it clear that he's in no position to think about girlfriends or anything like that, considering he doesn't even have a place of his own to live with Suzu. And well, after convincing Tamayo to let them stay at the house, Naoto heads to school and meets Satsuki on the way. And upon returning home, Naoto and Suzu go straight in the garden to check on the crops, and are surprised to see the plants growing so fast. But suddenly, Naoto decides to talk more seriously with Suzu, and says he saw the low grade she got on her test that was on the table. At this, Suzu's spine begins to shiver, but then suggests that Naoto teach her the subjects, as she says she has difficulty learning everything on her own. Considering her extremely low grades, Naoto realizes he has no choice but to help her with her studies. However, he makes it clear that she needs to grow up soon and start doing things on her own. But upon hearing this, Suzu hugs him and says she never have to grow up. After all, she believes she have him by her side forever. Another day at school, Naoto discovers he also needs to study for exams. Ishihara invites him to study with her on the weekends, as she can study more easily when she's around people. Upon hearing this, Naoto feels privileged to receive an invitation directly from Ishihara. He immediately falls in love, but begins to sabotage himself, telling himself the girl was just being nice to him. Suddenly, Takui finds him and tells him he seems to be getting along very well with Ishihara, something he thought was impossible. And although he told Naoto to give up on trying to get along with her, Takui says he's rooting for them both. Seeing Takui shipping them both, Naoto says he still believes the girl is too much for him, so just the fact that she's friendly with him is something he admires greatly. With that, Takui leaves the room and wishes him good luck with his studies. Naoto then remembers that he'll also have to help Suzu with her studies, meaning he'll have less time to study with Ishihara, or even alone. And well, after finishing class, Naoto notices a heavy rain and decides to wait it out before leaving. Suddenly, Satsuki approaches him and offers to borrow her umbrella. Upon hearing this, Naoto reminds her that Ima will also need her umbrella, but she makes it clear that she has a spare in her locker. During the conversation, Naoto notices that he didn't see her at school this morning. Satsuki informs him that she went to his house that morning, but when she saw him with Suzu, she thought it best not to disturb their moment. However, she followed them 5 meters away. After returning home, Naoto goes to Suzu's locker when she was still at school. There, he finds her real test and discovers that she actually got a good grade from the start. Suddenly, Suzu comes home and finds him snooping through her locker. He then sneakily hides her evidence in his pocket and makes an excuse to leave the house, needing to think about what he's just discovered. Suddenly, he runs into Satsuki, who, by the way, doesn't have her umbrella. Seeing her like this, Naoto asks about the umbrella she mentioned. Satsuki starts running away from him until he catches up with her. Then, she decides to tell him the truth, telling him she was mistaken about having another umbrella in her closet. But upon hearing this excuse, Naoto clearly doesn't buy her line, and then he wonders why people started lying to him. Upon hearing this, Satsuki deduces that there's some kind of fight going on between him and Suzu, but Naoto tells her she's mistaken, and then puts his coat on her to keep her from catching a cold in the rain. And well, after heading to her house, Naoto comes across an old place that looks like it's frozen in time. However, Satsuki says that at least Shite has a bathtub, which gives it a little more confrontation. Seeing that she lives in a house like this, Naoto wonders about her parents and if they're worried about leaving her in such conditions. As soon as Satsuki enters the house, she asks him to go home as soon as possible so he doesn't get sick. However, seeing him hesitate, Satsuki pulls Naoto into their house and tells him he can stay if he wants. Upon hearing this, Naoto says he needs to get home soon because he needs to take care of Suzu. However, Satsuki reminds him that Suzu is already 10 years old, so she can certainly manage on her own. She also suggests that he prioritize his own desires from time to time. Noticing he's still worried about his sister, Satsuki asks if he'd be unsure about leaving her in the background for a while. Upon hearing this, Naoto becomes irritated again, saying that Satsuki has no way of knowing what their situation is. With that, he leaves the place and heads home. On the way, Naoto admits that he's actually using his younger sister as a shield to avoid interacting properly with people, but at the same time, he believes his life is going well this way. As for Satsuki's suggestion that he prioritize his own desires, Naoto says the only thing he wants to prioritize is Suzu. Well, after returning home, he asks Suzu if he can study with Ishihara next weekend, and in exchange for her permission, he promises to return home as soon as possible and buy her something as a gift. Upon hearing this, Suzu reminds him that he promised to help her study, but Naoto shows her real math grade, which, by the way, was the highest possible. Suzu continues to be a bit of a jerk, saying she got that grade by pure luck, since she usually only gets 30s. Having said that, Suzu grabs him by the arm and says she can't do anything without his help. However, Naoto realizes that he won't be able to stay with his sister forever, because even though they are very close, they are still individuals who need their own space. And well, the next day, Naoto wakes up with a cold due to the rain he got in the day before. He then orders Suzu to go to school alone, and although she initially doesn't accept this condition, she eventually understands and goes to school alone. Sometime later, Satsuki enters Naoto's room through the garden and says she's there to give him some cold medicine. Suddenly, they're startled by the house intercom, which starts ringing. Naoto goes to the door, believing it's just a package for Tamayo, but upon seeing the person behind the intercom, he realizes it's Ishihara, who asks to come in and check on him. And even though he's still in his pajamas, Naoto lets her in. Ishihara asks to use his kitchen, as she's going to make rice porridge to get rid of his cold as quickly as possible. As soon as she finishes the dish, Ishihara goes to his room to deliver it. Satsuki quickly hides them under the blanket, avoiding being seen by the girl in the room with Naoto. And when seeing a package of suppositories and tea on the floor, Ishihara picks up the package and doesn't understand why Naoto has something like that in his room. He tries to explain, saying that Satsuki brought the medicine there. And right after saying this, he realizes he's made a mistake, as he ended up explaining that the girl was in his room at some point. Naoto turns his back to hide it, but Ishihara begins to notice him shaking and asks if everything is okay. As for Satsuki, she complicates the situation even further for Naoto by hugging him tightly. Meanwhile, Ishihara stands watching from afar, deducing that Naoto is truly unwell. She places her hand on his head to measure his fever and notices that, in fact, he still has the same body temperature as before. And well, after the girl leaves the room, Naoto gets off Satsuki and tells her to leave to avoid being discovered. Meanwhile, Ishihara ponders what she heard Naoto say about Satsuki coming to his room earlier. However, remembering that they are just childhood friends, Ishihara tries to fool himself into believing that they are actually just good friends and nothing more. Meanwhile, Satsuki notices Suzu staring at her from afar and asks her to help her with the planning, as even though Naoto had told her to go home, Satsuki decided to stay a little longer to tend to the garden. As for Suzu, she begins to complain about her brother no longer spoiling her, believing she should go her own way. Hearing this, Satsuki says that he would probably get better from his fever faster if Suzu came to see him. Upon hearing this, Suzu initially disagrees, saying he'll be fine either way. But soon after, she puts her pride aside and decides to go check on Naoto. Before doing so, Suzu turns to Satsuki and says she's been meaning to ask her for a while what happened 6 years ago regarding the destroyed garden. At that time, Satsuki destroyed the garden and then left with a mysterious person. Suzu asked who that unknown person was. But upon hearing this, Satsuki changes the subject, saying there was no one else with her that day. Therefore, she deduces that Suzu is having a false memory. After all, she was still very young when it happened. As for why she destroyed the garden, Satsuki says she did it because she was angry with Naoto the day before, following a fight they had. Hearing this, Suzu remembers when her brother first met Satsuki, and notices that since then he's had less time to play with her. And well, putting those thoughts aside, Suzu goes to him to check on Naoto. He tells her he's already fully healed, attributing it to the porridge Ishihara made for him earlier. And when he notices that Suzu not only woke up early, but also did her hair herself, Naoto is astonished. As for Suzu, she says she's finally decided to start becoming more independent and less of a burden to her older brother. However, She makes it clear that she'll still be the same old naughty girl and needs her brother's help. Upon hearing this, Naoto says he doesn't quite understand what she wants, but he still accepts her request and says he'll continue to pamper her as he always has. Well, now at school, Naoto feels time fly by, and to make matters worse, he realizes he hasn't been able to exchange a single word with Ishihara, and after thinking about it a little more, he decides to simply give up on her so he can have a more peaceful high school life. And as for the boys around, they see Naoto looking at Ishihara a lot, and then they start to belittle him, saying that he could never have anything with a girl, so they advise him to give up on her before he ends up seriously burned. And as for Tokui, he says that he always studied with Ishihara, and so he knows that she stood out from an early age, to the point of even ending up getting involved in scary situations. Upon hearing this, Naoto realizes that being a pretty girl has its challenges. And well, another time, while leaving school, he comes across Ishihara being approached by a man accompanied by his friends. He assumes the guy is her boyfriend, but soon realizes that the guy is actually just another guy hitting on her. After seeing her dismiss the boy, Naoto decides to simply follow him home, until suddenly Ishihara calls him by his name. After exchanging a few words, Naoto blushes and turns away again, saying he's going home. But upon hearing this, Ishihara invites him to study with her in the library, and he finally relents. Once in class, Naoto doesn't understand why a girl like her is helping him so much, including with his studies. He starts thinking out loud and accidentally blurts out these words, leaving Ishihara stunned. She then explains that she's helping him because he's a transfer student, and since they're on the same committee, the coordinating teacher asked her to help Naoto with whatever he needs. Hearing these reasons, he understands her and believes they're reasonable reasons for her to help him. But beyond that, Ishihara says there's another reason she wants to be close to him and help him. In this case, it's because she considers him different from other boys. And although he may not remember, Ishihara says they'd already met before he transferred to that new school. At the time, she was changing in the conference room when suddenly, Naoto opened the door, rushing open, as if in a hurry to do something. At that moment, he reveals that he's looking for Suzu, his younger sister. And well, remembering that he actually did it, Naoto begins to feel embarrassed. After all, he'd shut off his nervous impulses in that moment due to Suzu's disappearance. Then, he realizes that constantly thinking about his younger sister is harmful. But upon hearing this, Ishihara says that he's actually wrong to think that way, because unlike other boys who only worry about dating, he at least transfers that concern to his family. Furthermore, she expresses discomfort when referring to the other students in the class, as they constantly talk about sexual things throughout the entire class, in addition to constantly asking her out. That said, Ishihara remembers that Naoto is completely different from these other boys. After all, he's a kind, honest, and pure guy. And well, noticing that she's the only one talking all this time, Ishihara decides to stop talking for a bit, as she needs to leave. And as he leaves the room, Ishihara runs into Satsuki and asks what she's doing there. To this, she replies that she's just waiting for Naoto to get out of school. At another point, Naoto talks to Tokui and says that the image Ishihara created of him is that of a pure man who cares only about his sister. And while these characteristics may seem good, Naoto believes Ishihara actually meant that he doesn't consider him a romantic partner. But upon hearing this, Tokui says he interpreted things in a completely different way. However, Naoto says he is willing to not break this ideal that Ishihara placed in her mind about him, because that way, they can continue to get along. And suddenly, Satsuki comes up to them and says that Naoto should not care so much about these little things. And seeing the girl there with them, Tokui asks what exactly they are. Naoto then says she's just a childhood friend and nothing more. Well, as night falls, Naoto decides to study some more of what Ishihara taught him. But during his studies, he starts thinking about indecent things, which ends up affecting his academic performance. Suddenly, he remembers the moment he and Satsuki were glued to his bed, and then he begins to imagine what it would be like if it were Ishihara instead of Satsuki. However, he says it out loud enough for the girl next to him to hear. Naoto then covers up, saying he's going to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Ishihara remembers running into Satsuki outside school, and deduces that she doesn't see Naoto as just a childhood friend. Feeling more pressure, Ishihara believes she could broach a subject with Naoto that she's been hiding for a while, but feels she needs to work up more courage to do so. And well, the next day, Suzu notices her brother has been acting strange since the previous day, and doesn't understand what exactly is happening to him. She only knows he's trying to eradicate a certain thought from her head. Upon hearing this, Satsuki decides to go to the boy and reminds him that they have a test. As for him, Naoto, still in his zombie state, accidentally wets her, and in doing so, he looks away, avoiding the wet Satsuki. Seeing him in this state, Satsuki confirms that he is indeed acting strangely. At school, Satsuki teases Naoto, saying he couldn't sleep well because he was thinking about Ishihara's breast. Upon hearing this, Naoto asks her to stop bothering him, but doesn't deny her statement. Satsuki then then reminds him that because of him, her underwear got soaked, so she had to go to school without any clothes underneath. Hearing this, Naoto begins to worry about her and tells her to be careful, because if she gets careless, she could expose a lot of things. She asks what exactly will be visible, but Naoto only elaborates on that, saying she knows exactly what he's talking about. During their conversation, they are interrupted by Ishihara, who, upon seeing Naoto, immediately notices that he was up all night and assumes he stayed up studying. And well, as they walk through school, Ishihara sees Naoto staring at Satsuki excessively. But even though this could be a bad sign, she says she's willing to talk to him more seriously. So she asks him to go with her to a certain place after the exams. Hearing this, Naoto assumes she's practically asking him out, and then he's stuck, not knowing what to say. At this, Ishihara assumes he's not interested in going out with her, but Naoto quickly corrects her, saying he does intend to go out with her. But suddenly, a very strong wind hits the place, lifting the skirts of all the students. At this point, Naoto, afraid of Satsuki's skirt riding up too high, throws himself on her back and hugs her to prevent his from riding up too high. Seeing this suggestive scene, Ishihara becomes embarrassed and runs away. As for Satsuki, she reveals that she was actually wearing Naoto's underwear the whole time. Upon discovering this, he feels like an idiot for trying to help her. Well, a week later, Naoto feels the tension between him and Ishihara is still a little tense. And suddenly, the students decide to plan a beach trip that weekend with the whole class. And upon returning home, Naoto thanks Tokui for his help to call everyone to go have fun at the beach. However, he feels that the situation between him and Ishihara is not yet completely resolved. So going out with the whole group, including her, was something that was not in his plans. And to make things even worse, Naoto remembers that he will need to stay 2 days away from Suzu, something that will make him worried while he is away. And after thinking a little more, he decides to take his sister to the beach with his friends. But as soon as he gets home, Naoto discovers that Suzu will also be going on a beach trip that weekend, which makes him feel more relieved, as he won't have to worry about Suzu during the 2 days he'll be away. He explains to her that he's also supposed to go to the beach with his friends that same weekend. Upon hearing this, Suzu asks to go with him, but Naoto reminds her that she can't miss official school activities. Suzu understands, but asks who will take care of the garden in their absence. Naoto, in turn, reminds her that they can still count on his aunt, because even though she's a bit grumpy, Naoto believes she won't mind helping them with that. As for Suzu, she begins to cry with sadness knowing they'll be apart for 2 days, and then asks Naoto to at least go with her to buy her swimsuit the next day, to make her a little happier. And well, the next day, when he goes to school, he mentions to Satsuki about the new swimsuit he's going to buy for his sister. Satsuki asks to go with him. After all, she needs to buy a swimsuit for herself too. Upon hearing this, Naoto immediately accepts her company, feeling that having her there will make things less tense for him. Meanwhile, Ishihara stands at a distance, listening to the two until suddenly, Tokui appears behind her and advises her to go with them. Upon hearing this, Ishihara says it's best to keep to herself, so as not to disrupt their potential date. After all, there are already rumors that Naoto and Satsuki are dating, so getting in between them will only upset them. However, Tokui reminds her that Naoto himself hasn't confirmed these rumors, so their relationship isn't certain yet. Even so, Ishihara remains tense about the situation and also says she won't go on the beach trip with the group. Upon hearing this, Tokui tries to encourage her again, saying that she really likes Naoto and shouldn't give up on him so easily. However, the girl remains confused and wonders if there's still time to get something from him. Tokui replies yes, but lets her know that she must race against time if she really wants to have him for herself. Meanwhile, Naoto accompanies Suzu and Satsuki to the swimsuit shop. The girls start asking which swimsuits look best on them, but Naoto turns his face away and tells them to choose any outfit. Seeing he's not interested, Satsuki begins to tease him further, mentioning the size of her breast. But Naoto stands firm, saying he doesn't want to hear that kind of information. With that, Naoto leaves, claiming he's going to look for some men's clothing on the other side of the store. Meanwhile, Ishihara hides behind the shelves, simply watching the two meet, and begins to feel like a crazy stalker. Suddenly, one of the store clerks notices her presence and goes to Ishihara to help her. At this point, the girl realizes she really needs to buy a swimsuit, since she's grown a lot since last year. So, Ishihara asks the attendant to help her find a modest swimsuit that won't draw attention to her saint. But as soon as she says this, she remembers that she won't be able to attract Naoto's attention if she chooses something modest. So she changes her mind, asking the attendant to bring her a swimsuit that's only a little flashy, something not very sensual. Upon hearing this, the attendant brings the first outfit for her and says Ishihara looked amazing in that bikini. And although she receives this compliment from the attendant, Ishihara says she doesn't have the courage to wear something so short, so she asks for more options. At this point, the attendant begins to understand the type of customer in front of her and realizes that Ishihara is actually looking for a swimsuit to attract someone's attention. So, she asks Ishihara if the guy in question has any preferences. At this point, Ishihara remembers the swimsuit Satsuki was wearing and says that the guy she's interested in likes bold, somewhat mature girls with long hair. After hearing all these characteristics described by Ishihara, the attendant informs her that there are hair pieces and wigs in the store, should she want to become even more like the ideal woman her crush desires. But once Ishihara is completely transformed by the attendant, she becomes even more shy, hoping Naoto never sees her so boldly. As for him, Naoto sees her from behind but doesn't recognize her. He goes to one of the dressing rooms to change Suzu, but ends up making a mistake and sees Satsuki naked. And even though it was just an accident, Naoto runs to her to apologize. And on the train home, Satsuki notices that Naoto doesn't usually tell the other students about the bad things she does. Otherwise, Tokui wouldn't have even invited her to go to the beach with him. Naoto reminds her that any misunderstandings between them should stay between them, so he doesn't see the need to tell anyone. Noticing her standing far away from them, Suzu calls her to the seat next to her to talk, but Satsuki decides to stay where she is. As for Naoto, he remembers that there's a huge gap between him and Satsuki, due to what happened 6 years ago. This makes even their current relationship a little strained and likely to end at any moment. Well, getting off the train, Naoto runs into Ishihara on the street. The two start talking, and Ishihara suddenly asks if he's really dating Satsuki. Upon hearing this sudden question, Naoto notices that the girl is a bit confused, and so he tries to explain himself. However, Ishihara deduces that he's just trying to dodge the issue and tells him to stop hiding this truth from her. However, Naoto persists on the subject, saying that this so-called relationship between the two is nothing more than a simple misunderstanding. However, even though he tries to deny it, Ishihara says he saw them kissing in his backyard. Hearing this, Naoto is startled, as he didn't know she had seen them. At this, he doesn't know what to come up with to get around the situation, as anything he says will sound completely false. So Naoto believes it's all truly over now, but Satsuki tries to turn the tables, claiming she's the kind of person who kisses others as a greeting. To further reinforce this lie, Satsuki kisses Ishihara on the cheek, making her believe her lie more easily. Upon seeing this, Naoto is shocked by the scene, saying that resorting to such a thing is already crazy. However, Satsuki says she did it to prove to Ishihara that she has nothing to do with Naoto. After all, she'll kiss anyone. As for Naoto, he also tries to reassure Ishihara, saying he's looking forward to going to the beach with her the next day. Ishihara wonders if he'll make any comments about her swimsuit. After all, the girl is still thinking about the last One's comment the day before they left, in this case, when he said he was looking forward to going to the beach with her. And because he said this to her, Ishihara believes she has an opening to get closer to him. And meanwhile, Naoto begins to worry about his sister, as this is the first time they've been apart for so long. And as he finds himself losing focus, Naoto remembers that his only concern there should be getting closer to Ishihara. However, upon seeing a group of men surrounding her, he realizes that there's no way to do that. And although he's desperately tempted to give up on her, Naoto reminds himself that doing so is the same as having gone there for nothing. And meanwhile, Satsuki is approached by two men who try to hit on her, but she grabs one of the men's arms tightly, starting a fight. Then, Naoto grabs Satsuki and runs away, telling her to always run away or get help when she's in a dangerous situation like this. As for her, Satsuki ignores him and only asks what he thought of her swimsuit. Naoto doesn't comment on it, leaving Satsuki upset with him. She then tells him to go after Ishihara. However, seeing her trying to start an argument, Naoto changes the subject and asks if she's also going to swim with the rest of the class. Upon hearing this, Satsuki says this is her first time at the beach, and besides, she hasn't learned to swim yet, as she always skips school swimming lessons. And upon discovering these things about her, Naoto realizes that he really doesn't know much about Satsuki, much less what her life has been like these past 6 years. As for her, Satsuki, even without knowing how to swim, says she wants to get in the water. But before she can leave, Tokui approaches them and asks Naoto to take Ishihara out for something to eat. As for Satsuki, he invites her to get to know the other girls in her class better. And on the way to the store, Naoto runs into Ishihara and asks her to go with him. And as they eat together, Naoto admires the girl's beauty out of the corner of his eye, feeling as if he's in a dream. Suddenly, a group of men notices them and begins to compliment Ishihara, but they say the guy next to her is ruining her beauty. Seeing so many men bothering her, Naoto decides to take her to a more secluded spot to avoid these kinds of comments. Along the way, he summons the courage to compliment her bikini, but soon after, he begins to apologize, believing he's crossed a line. However, Ishihara smiles at him and says she was happy to receive his compliments. But suddenly, in the middle of that moment, the two are interrupted by Fujioka, a boy who has had contact with Ishihara in the past. And although he wants to talk to her more, Fujioka says he's busy for now, and so he gets back in his car and leaves. As for Ishihara, she decides to go back to the hotel to rest. And when he goes to the girls, Naoto hears them talking Fujioka, a popular and influential boy, who broke up with Ishihara some time ago. But even though he knew they had broken up, Naoto noticed Ishihara was still very close to Fujioka, as if she still considered him a special person. As for Tokui, he notices the boy is very thoughtful and advises him to go to Ishihara and clear up any doubts he has about her and Fujioka if he's really thinking about it. At another point, Fujioka goes to Naoto looking for Ishihara. Upon discovering her location, he leaves the place to go directly after her. But first, he hands Naoto a bag, saying it's a gift for him and his friends. Naoto senses a very kind and friendly aura coming from Fujioka and realizes that he perfectly fits Ishihara's ideal man stereotype. Thus, Naoto begins to feel like a terrible rival for Fujioka, as he could never compare to the boy. Meanwhile, Fujioka talks to Ishihara and says he's surprised to learn she has a male friend. As for her, Ishihara brushes it off, saying she still admires him. After all, she'll always remember the kindness he showed her throughout their relationship. However, she has other plans now. But before she can finish, Fujioka says he's here to try to rekindle their relationship, so he asks her to meet him at the seaside restaurant at 7 p.m. Ishihara tries to explain again that she's already with someone else, but Fujioka insists on meeting her and asks her to give him her answer at the restaurant. Upon returning to the hostel, Ishihara runs into Satsuki, who tells her that Naoto is worried about Ishihara's closeness with Fujioka. Meanwhile, Naoto talks to some friends who remind him that he's already dating Satsuki, so there's no point in him keeping tabs on Ishihara. However, Naoto reminds them again that this was all a simple misunderstanding, as Satsuki has always been just his childhood friend. Seeing that the boy isn't interested in her, one of the young men says he'll confess his feelings to Satsuki, as he senses she's the type of girl who would give anyone a chance if they insisted. But seeing the boys treating her this way, Naoto defends Satsuki's honor, saying she's not what they imagine. However, as soon as he says this, Naoto realizes he's said too much and says he doesn't know her well enough to say anything about her. But as for her being irregular, he assures her that's a lie. The boy apologizes for saying that about her, but Naoto reassures him that everything is fine. As they talk, Satsuki stands from afar, watching Naoto defend her, until suddenly, Ishihara tells her he has an appointment, so he won't be able to stay for dinner with Naoto and the other students. Upon hearing this, Satsuki assumes she's going on a date with her ex. However, Ishihara lies, saying she won't do it. Furthermore, she claims she's never dated Fujioka and then runs out of the place. As for Satsuki, she finds Ishihara strange and decides to go to her friends to tell them what she heard, telling everyone that she's gone to meet her ex. Upon hearing this, one of the girls assumes Fujioka is thinking about getting back together. However, Satsuki believes they won't get back together as Ishihara wants, because according to Ishihara, the two never even dated. One of the girls then says that Ishihara is lying through his teeth. After all, the two were recognized as a couple at school. Meanwhile, Ishihara meets the boy at a restaurant, and during the meal, she remembers the first interactions they had at school. In this case, Fujioka always showed his interest in her, to the point that the students around him started to think that they were dating. However, Ishihara just kept pushing that situation under the rug, without telling him what she really thought about Fujioka. And in a conversation from the past, she finally mustered the courage to tell him the truth. But before she could continue, he interrupted her to say that he would be graduating soon, so they wouldn't be able to see each other for a while. Still, he made it clear that he wouldn't give up on her. Returning to the present, Ishihara said she didn't expect to see him again because she didn't think he was serious about investing in their relationship. He simply stopped contacting her after he graduated, which to her was proof that he no longer wanted anything serious with her. But upon hearing this, Fujioka says he was simply too busy with his studies, which ended up taking longer than expected to contact her. However, he makes it clear that they would have this contact sooner or later, as it was never part of his plans. And well, tired of all the pretense, Ishihara decides to be real, and says that she now has someone she likes. With that, she says goodbye and leaves in a hurry. And later, Fujioka goes to the lodging where Ishihara is staying and tells Naoto that the girl ran off in the middle of their date and decided to go home alone. Upon hearing this, Naoto worries about Ishihara and says they must go after her as soon as possible. Suddenly, Tokui shows up at the guest house. Upon discovering what happened to the girl, he grabs his cell phone and decides to call Ishihara. However, Fujioka says he's tried calling her several times, but in the end, she always ignores his calls. But soon after, Tokui manages to contact her on his first attempt, making it clear that her problem was with Fujioka himself. And upon ending the call, Tokui says Ishihara just took a slight detour on the way back, but he'll be back at the guest house soon. However, Tokui passes on a message from Ishihara exclusively to Fujioka. She wants him to leave for now. After all, she hasn't fully made up with him yet. Upon hearing this, Fujioka understands and says he'll return the next morning to try to talk to her better. As he leaves, Tokui reveals that everything he told the boy was actually made up, as his intention was to push Fujioka away so they could get straight to the point. In fact, the truth is that Ishihara doesn't intend to return to the hostel, but she said she's still around. So, Tokui hands Naoto the phone with the GPS and tells him to pick her up. and already on the way, he calls Ishihara to try to confirm her exact location. And before getting straight to the point, Ishihara first apologizes for making him so worried. After all, she just wanted some time to be alone and think while gazing at the sea. Having said that, she advises him to return to the hotel before her, but he agrees to stay there with her and tells her she can tell him anything. That's disturbing her peace. After all, he's there to listen and help her as much as possible. However, he makes it clear that she doesn't need to make too much of an effort if she doesn't want to talk to him. And as they talk, they end up meeting in person. However, Ishihara doesn't notice Naoto's presence there. And then, he hangs up the phone and comments on Naoto's relationship with Satsuki, and says that even though Naoto said they had nothing to do with each other, there's still a part of her that doubts it. Hearing her say these things, Naoto is incredulous. As for her, Ishihara is startled by his sudden presence and runs away, but this time, she loses her balance and falls to the ground, breaking her heel. Naoto then begins carrying her on his back, and on the way back to the lodging, he wonders if she was thinking about Fujioka, and so Ishihara asks him to put her down for a while. In this, she reveals that she never actually dated Fujioka. However, since she didn't have the courage to dump him, people around her started spreading rumors that they were dating. In the middle of the conversation, Fujioka arrives at the hotel accompanied by Ishihara's other roommates, and asks them to return to the hostel together. But before they do, Naoto interrupts him and reveals to everyone that, in fact, Ishihara's relationship with Fujioka was all a big misunderstanding. After all, the only one who thought they were dating was Fujioka himself. Upon hearing this, Fujioka tries to challenge Naoto's assertion and asks Ishihara if they're really dating. At this, she decides to be honest with him for the first time, saying she never thought they'd be in a relationship, and furthermore, she makes it clear that she never wants to see him again. Seeing her so stressed, Fujioka is at a loss and says he's the only one who can take care of her. However, Ishihara continues to rebut him, telling him he should stop talking over her and start listening to her a little more. However, Fujioka responds to Ishihara's imposition even more aggressively, grabbing her arm and ordering her to be quiet. Seeing the man losing control, Satsuki kneed him in the back, knocking him away from Ishihara. Furthermore, she grabbed Tokui's cell phone from Naoto and said she would file a stalker report. As for Fujioka, he continued to play the victim, saying he should be the one to sue Satsuki for the assault. However, he decided to back off for now and told Ishihara he was disappointed in her, as he always thought she was his ideal woman. Once they returned to the hostel, the girls apologized to Ishihara for treating her as Fujioka's girlfriend even though she wasn't. However, Ishihara says it's okay. After all, she didn't explain things properly at the time, which confused everyone. As for Tokui, he says he's happy to see Ishihara is okay. However, he remembers that Fujioka had said she would leave things as they are just for today, implying he'd come after her another time, alone with Satsuki. Ishihara thanks her for pushing Fujioka away from her at that moment. However, Satsuki says she only did it to clear Naoto's name, who, in her view, wasn't doing anything particularly helpful. But upon hearing this, Ishihara says that Naoto actually helped her with a lot of things, especially with their conversation, a conversation that opened her eyes and changed her outlook. And although he's not the ideal guy, Ishihara says she's willing to accept him as he is. In fact, she plans to confess her feelings to him as soon as they return from their trip. Later, Naoto goes to Satsuki and brings them something to eat while they talk. Suddenly, Satsuki says there's a connection between him and Ishihara. As for himself, Naoto says he's gotten closer to her lately, but he still thinks Ishihara is out of his league. And during the conversation, Satsuki says she hates the fact that he's so nice to her without any reason behind it. After all, it makes her believe she has a chance with Natio even though she doesn't. And having said that, Satsuki kisses him out of the blue and tells him that from now on, he doesn't need to be nice to her anymore, otherwise she might end up destroying something precious to him again. And at another moment, Naoto remembers from the conversation he had with Satsuki about the garden incident she caused. And from what she said, she implied that he was to blame for the outcome of this stain on their past. And upon further reflection, he remembers that the day before the incident, Satsuki went to his house and watched a romantic movie with him. And upon seeing that the film depicts a couple who run away to another city, Naoto begins to use his fertile childhood imagination and suggests to Satsuki that they run away together. On the way, Satsuki asks him to wait for her. Naoto pulls her hand and asks if she's tired, but Satsuki says she's not tired. In fact, she just thought it would be better for them to go somewhere even further away than a nearby town. As they walk, the sun begins to set, and Naoto's family, already worried about them, decides to wait for them outside the house. As they return home, Naoto says goodbye to Satsuki, saying he hopes to see her the next day. Recalling all this, Naoto notices that the expression on her face at that moment is no longer so clear to him. And suddenly, Suzu interrupts his train of thought and jumps into his lap. Naoto tells her that staying home with Suzu is actually much better than he imagined. As for her, Suzu notices that their garden already needs more maintenance, even though they've only been away for a day. So, she asks them to fix it the next day. day. However, Naoto inadvertently ignores her, his mind still occupied with Satsuki. Meanwhile, Ishihara practices his declaration to Naoto in front of the mirror. But even with all her effort, Ishihara believes she won't be able to muster the courage to tell Naoto. Meanwhile, Satsuki leaves home for school when she suddenly runs into Naoto on the way. He asks her why she didn't help him with the garden the day before. As for her, Satsuki is completely confused, having assumed he'd come to her to complain about the kiss they shared 2 days ago. After all, she kissed him out of the blue, and his reaction was that of someone who felt nothing. However, Naoto says that in truth, he simply didn't understand why it was happening, and that's why he couldn't react as positively as she would have liked. And although he explains the situation to her, Satsuki remains angry with him, believing he didn't like being kissed by her. Naoto doesn't know how to respond, and Satsuki further reinforces in her mind the idea that he hates her. Upon hearing this, Naoto tries again to make amends, telling her that she's misunderstanding everything. Furthermore, Naoto makes it clear that neither he nor his family are angry with her for destroying their plantation. What really upsets him is the fact that she disappeared afterward. So, what he really hated was the awful feeling of not being able to see her anymore. Upon hearing his new explanation, Satsuki finally understands him, but still calls him strange. Naoto reminds her that he was a child at the time, so it's natural that he felt pain over losing a friend so suddenly. Hearing this, Satsuki says that the simple fact that he's still worried about not being able to see her anymore means that deep down, he still likes her. However, Naoto starts to blush and says that this feeling of fear he had is a thing of the past, when he was a child, and seeing him trying to push her away, saying he no longer cares about her, Satsuki says she will stay away from him from now on. With that, she turns her back and leaves him behind talking to himself. And suddenly, he looks back and notices that Suzu was behind a lamppost listening to their conversation the whole time, and Suzu makes it clear that they'll have a little chat as soon as they get back from school. And well, moving on with his day, Naoto is approached by Ishihara at school, and the girl asks to speak with him in private. And when they go to a more secluded place, Ishihara thanks him for helping her with her senpai. And after saying this, she decides to stop beating around the bush and say what she really wants. But before she can go any further, the two are interrupted by a group of 3 students who try to approach her to confess their feelings. Meanwhile, other students stand back and watch, explaining that the boys' discovery that Ishihara wasn't dating her senpai gave them the opportunity to start pursuing a relationship with her. Upon hearing this, Naoto realizes that the trip to the beach was made precisely so he could get closer to Ishihara, but in the end, this only allowed other boys to have more freedom to approach her. Furthermore, Naoto begins to question what he really wants with Ishihara. Meanwhile, Tokui finds Satsuki lying on the grass and asks if she's skipping school. When she doesn't answer, he notices that she's in a bad mood. Satsuki is startled by his ability to sense this so easily. Tokui, in turn, says it's quite obvious she's not feeling well. Satsuki says she's like this because of Naoto, because when she's with him, she feels like it's not impossible to achieve what she wants. But in her last encounter with him, Satsuki discovered she's truly incapable of achieving what she wants, and because of that, she says she regrets having gone to see him. Hearing this, Tokui still doesn't quite understand her and asks what exactly this thing she wants is. Satsuki says that this something she wants is something so normal that Tokui and Naoto probably wouldn't understand. At another point, Naoto sees Satsuki and Tokui entering school together, and he doesn't understand what's going on between them. After all, he remembers Satsuki saying she wasn't the least bit interested in Tokui. Suddenly, Ishihara tries to approach him to talk, but ends up being ignored, as Naoto's mind is so busy that he can't even hear her. At this point, Ishihara realizes it's a bad day to confess her feelings to him, and deduces that perhaps this isn't a good idea to put into practice that day. But she still overcomes these difficulties and asks Naoto to go home with her. However, she remembers at the last minute that she has to stay at school to clean the pool, so Ishihara turns around and leaves, leaving Naoto behind, confused. Another time, Naoto accidentally runs into her again while she's changing in the men's locker room. Seeing more people coming, Naoto decides to close the door and stay with Ishihara until everyone leaves. But as soon as he tries to open the door again, Naoto says it's stuck. Suddenly, the students passing by notice the locked door and decide to go change in the pool. Meanwhile, Naoto gets a fright when he sees Ishihara barely dressed, and tries to find a way to open the door so she can change more comfortably. However, Ishihara asks him to wait, as he has something he's been wanting to tell him for a while. But before getting to the main topic, Ishihara says that the situation that happened to them reminds her of when the two met. After all, Naoto had also entered the locker room while she was changing. Upon hearing this, Naoto apologizes to her for these things continuing to happen. However, Ishihara asks him not to blame himself so much. After all, this time it was entirely her fault, as Ishihara entered the wrong locker room. Furthermore, she makes it clear that she was glad to have met him back then, as her feelings for him have been changing ever since. Just as she was about to confess, they are interrupted again, this time by a school employee, who burst open the door door and pushes Naoto onto Ishihara. At this point, the girl finally finishes saying what had been stuck in her throat for a long time. Ishihara confesses that she likes him, but as soon as she says this, she leaves the place running. And on the way back home, Naoto ponders the girl's declaration until he suddenly runs into her and takes the opportunity to apologize to her, but then immediately turns to leave. At this, Ishihara decides to be more direct and asks him if he wants to date her or not. Hearing this, Naoto is shocked, as he thought the "I like you" she had said wasn't in a romantic sense. As for her, Ishihara tells him he doesn't need to answer her right away. She then turns to leave, but ends up hitting her face against a wall, still showing she's disconcerted by the whole situation. As for Naoto, he remains in shock, having just heard the girl he admires confess her feelings to him. When he gets home, he tells Suzu about the fight he had with Satsuki. Suzu picks some tomatoes and tells him to take them to Satsuki as a reconciliation gift. He goes to the girl's house, and upon seeing the door open, Naoto enters, calling for Satsuki, but she's nowhere to be found. And as he pauses to reflect on the expression the girl gave him that day, Naoto finally remembers, and says that in fact, she was hiding a smile, but clearly hiding great sadness. And as he searches the house, Naoto discovers where she works, and so he goes there to talk to her. But within seconds of talking, they are interrupted by the store manager, who asks Naoto to fill in for one of his employees. In this case, he will have to wear a bear costume and stand next to Satsuki while she hands out the store flyers. After work, he tries to talk to her again and advises her to fix her door, as someone might break in and do something bad. Upon hearing this, Satsuki says that no one cares about anything that happens to her. However, Naoto contradicts her, saying that at least he does. Satsuki smiles at him and decides to stop thinking about leaving. After arriving at her house, Satsuki asks if he intends to stay with Ishihara, and Naoto, in turn, says he still doesn't know how to respond to her statement. But the next day, he summons his courage and calls Ishihara to give his final answer to her request. And with that, Naoto calls Ishihara to talk right after Erev's at school and says he couldn't believe it when he heard her ask him out, and so he needed some time to better process everything that had happened. So, Naoto preferred to wait so he could give the girl a more appropriate response. Meanwhile, Ishihara is tense, waiting for his answer, and when Naoto does, he apologizes to her, saying he's not ready to meet her expectations, so he asks for more time to think. Guys, a piece of advice for you: if you're going through something unexpected, because it's difficult for you there on the other side, eating Cheetos while watching the video, to be going through a situation like this. You say you don't want to. It's better, because if you want to stall, someone else will take the lead. Although he says this, Naoto makes it clear that he is already aware that she may find someone else in the meantime. After all, she is one of the most popular students in school, while she, Ishihara, says that she cannot wait for an answer from him. After all, she already knows that he is the boy she wants, so she asks them to take a test, in which case they must date until the summer vacation. And if he wants to undo this test at any time, he will have permission to do so, and she will never be able to try anything with him again. And upon seeing this, Naoto refuses this test immediately, as he believes that doing so would be disrespectful. However, Ishihara insists on this idea, and says that if she gives up there and then, she will no longer have any hope of being with him. At another point, Naoto talks to Tokui about the conversation he had with the girl, and says that he decided to collaborate with the test she proposed. And upon discovering that Naoto did not accept the test right away, Tokui is left confused, as he always believed that he had feelings for Ishihara, while Naoto confirms what Tokui says, because he really likes the girl, and that's precisely why he was against the idea of the test initially. After all, he didn't want to disappoint her. Furthermore, Naoto says he will need to sort out his life if he wants to start a relationship, because currently his only concern is high school and his sister Soso. Therefore, Naoto says he is willing to go after a job as soon as he graduates. After all, he will need to find a place to live with Ishihara. He says all this. Naoto sighs with tiredness, because he longs to become as independent as he is today. But in addition to this dependency problem he has involving his aunt, Naoto says he also feels insecure about having a date with Ishihara, because he continues to feel inadequate. And when Tokui, he reminds him that the two are officially together, at least for now, then asks how he is feeling about that, and Naoto in turn claims to be happy. And upon seeing this, Tokui makes it clear that he has the knife and the cheese in hand. Therefore, the boy's only obligation is to make everything work out, while he, Tokui, makes it clear that he can help him with any questions Naoto is about part-time jobs, since he is an expert in that. And suddenly, Satsuki goes to the two, and upon seeing that Naoto is dating the girl with the breast cheese, she starts to get irritated and depress him, but tries to disguise it by wishing the couple happiness. And upon seeing this, Naoto is surprised, as he thought she would kill him. And as for Tokui, he breaks the flow of the conversation with another subject. In this case, he starts to compliment Satsuki's work clothes in an ironic way. And upon seeing this, Satsuki gave to that they went to her work just to make fun of the situation, so she tells the two to leave. However, Naoto calms her down by saying that she got it all wrong. After all, he is there for a job interview, as he called the establishment's agency the day before looking for work, and to his surprise, Naoto was called for an interview the very next day. While Satsuki, she says that it is his last day at that job. After all, he will work in a place that pays better than there, and upon seeing this, Naoto becomes quiet, and Satsuki approaches him, saying that she is sorry that he does not have her presence during work. However, Naoto says that he does not mind about it. Then he gets up to go to the job interview that he was supposed to do at the place. And that, Satsuki talks to Tokui about this attempt of Naoto to fix his life, since he wants to start dating and working at the same time, which for her will be a big challenge for a clumsy guy like him. While Tokui, he asks if she was not affected by the fact that he is dating another girl, and she, in turn, says that she is calm because she knows that their friendship childhood romance with Naoto will continue to connect the two of them, even though he is dating someone else. Meanwhile, Naoto meets with the person responsible for conducting his interview and discovers that there is a girl who will also be working there. In this case, she will replace Satsuki, who decided to suddenly quit her job. Upon seeing the girl, Naoto realizes that he has seen her somewhere before, but he doesn't remember where. He starts to get closer to her to get a better look and find out where he saw her. But at that exact moment, the girl wakes up and gets scared when she sees him on top of her. Then, the girl starts accusing her of having done something to her because she saw him trying to kiss her. While Naoto tries to explain the situation better, but in the middle of the conversation, the manager goes to the room and asks what is happening. The girl points to Naoto and says that he was trying to attack her while she was sleeping. Upon seeing this, Naoto also tries to fight back. The manager says that he will hear each of them separately, and when he's moving away from the girl, Naoto begins to mock her coldly, believing that he will no longer get the job due to the fact that the girl treated him like a pervert until suddenly Ishihara finds him on the way and calls him to talk. In this, Naoto does not know what to say to her and lets an awkward silence take over the environment. And seeing him very quiet, Ishihara decides to start bringing up the subject right away, and then asks if he would like to go somewhere after school the next day, and he in turn answers yes without hesitation. And upon hearing this, Ishihara realizes that they will definitely be on their first date, since they will be there alone. While Naoto, he realizes that she is right, because although they have already left school together a few times, this time, they will be meeting as boyfriends, and even though it is just a test, Naoto feels distressed about the date they will have. And the next day, after class, Naoto goes to meet Ishihara, but takes Suzu with him, as he couldn't leave her alone at home. He then starts to apologize to her for having to take his sister to the meeting. However, Ishihara understands him and starts talking to Suzu in an attempt to make friends with the girl. Suzu is amazed by Ishihara's beauty and makes it clear that she won't be fooled just because the girl is pretty and seems like a nice person, while Ishihara continues to use her sympathy as a weapon to win Suzu and says that they will both have fun for that day. Suzu continues to act tough and says that she will make an exception for Ishihara only for that day. Meanwhile, Taku and Satsuki stay from afar watching Naoto's date, but seeing that everything is going well, Taku decides to leave while Satsuki stays in one place as she intends to continue observing Naoto and Ishihara for a while longer. In this, Taku decides to continue following until suddenly they arrive at the zoo, and Satsuki remains committed to observing them, and after a while, Naoto and the girls decide to go to a wooded area to have a picnic with the snacks prepared by Ishihara. In this, Naoto tells her that he will take care of the food the next time they go out. Meanwhile, Taku and Satsuki feel like eating something too, so he calls Satsuki to go eat something with him and leave Naoto's date there. After all, he can no longer bear to watch them for so long, and upon seeing this, Satsuki says he can leave, but she'll stay there to watch over them both. During their meeting, Ishihara notices Suzu looking tired. Naoto says this is his sister's first meeting since they moved to that place. Upon noticing that Ishihara is being patient with him in many ways, Naoto affirms that she is a very good person and then begins to belittle himself, saying he's not a good enough person to have her by his side. Dude, don't keep saying things like that about yourself. You're forcing me to agree, man, because I think the same thing. But I notice these negative thoughts taking over her mind. Naoto forces herself to forget all of this and instead tells Ishihara that she will get a job and he will save up some money and take her to a place during the summer holidays. And upon seeing this, Ishihara deduces that he will start working at the Chinese restaurant she found the other day. However, Naoto says that he will not be able to work there anymore because of a certain problem involving the misunderstanding, but he makes it clear that he will look for another place as soon as possible. Noticing that he's having trouble finding a job, Ishihara says she doesn't need to be taken to a special place to feel good. After all, what she really likes is his company. While they were about to hold hands, suddenly Suzu gets up and runs to the bathroom, and on the way she bumps into Satsuki Tokui by accident, and then they start talking, and Naoto hears the girl talking to someone and goes to the place to see who she is interacting with. And upon discovering who they are, Naoto gets scared and asks what they are doing there, and Satsuki does not deny that she was watching them, but makes it clear that she will leave now so as not to continue working on their date, and so she pulls Suzu to an ice cream shop, and says that Tokui will pay for the ice cream for them, while Naoto, he apologizes to Ishihara for the awkward atmosphere, and then continues enjoying the zoo with her, until suddenly, their hands touch, and after some candy, they finally get along, and after that, they go home, but before that, Ishihara stops at a certain convenience store to buy something he hopes to use on summer vacation. Yes, she bought the Batman cape, she bought it, and that night, Naoto thinks about the moment he held hands with Ishihara, and realizes that dating is something more incredible than he expected. So Naoto decides to start taking his life more seriously, trying even harder in professional and academic fields, and the next day, at school, Ishihara's admirers begin to notice Naoto very close to her, and then, I ask if the two are dating, and seeing the fury in the boy's eyes, Naoto says that they have nothing, and so, he manages to push them away, once and for all, and when it's time to leave, that girl in front of the job interview introduces herself to the students with a corner, and asks them to call Naoto to go talk to her. My friends, what is this girl Hiraya? It's probably soft if it depends on this protagonist, but she goes after it, leaves a like and subscribes, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.